Hello, my spooky crew, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. My name is Alex, and thanks for coming to my spooky corner of the internet. This particular topic has been probably one of my most requested topics of 2022, and now we're in 2023, and I've already booked like 2 events to talk about this very topic. But I also know that not everybody can go to a convention, or, they can't sit through a lecture, or, for a variety of reasons. So what I'm going to do in this particular video is I am going to share a shortened, condensed version of a talk that I do about how to paranormal investigate or how to ghost hunt without using trauma to get a response from the spirits and or ghosts. If you're a brand new paranormal investigator, this is a great topic to dive into. If you are a regular paranormal investigator, this is also a great topic to dive into. As paranormal content creation continues to grow, especially on social media sites like TikTok and YouTube, where, this very place, there seems to be this trend that has, I'm not going to say begun because this has been going on for years, but there's this trend or even an uptick of people who are ghost hunting or going on paranormal investigations and bringing up really sensitive and disturbing topics in order to get a response from the spirits. And I'm going to be honest, it's kind of icky, but I also know that a lot of paranormal investigators will use this tactic. I mean, I've used it myself, but I'll be honest, after I've used trauma to get a response out of spirits, I felt bad. So it's something that I don't do anymore because I feel bad. And of course, this doesn't count those times where you unintentionally bring up trauma. Like if you ask the spirit about, hey, do you have kids? And you didn't know that spirit lost their kids prematurely. That's different. Unintentional, I guess, trauma is something different. But if you're intentionally bringing up trauma to get a response from spirits, then that's an issue. But a lot of people don't know that it's an issue. So in this video, I'm going to essentially lay out why it's an issue, why we need to stop, and other things that you can talk about with spirits that don't include trauma. The audience for this video is going to be very specific this time around. But before we get started, be sure to click on that subscribe button, give this video a like, and be sure to click on that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload a new video. And if you want more spooky stuff, paranormal content, ghost hunting content, then head on over to my website at thespookystuff.com. If you look up my name on Amazon, you will find lots of books that I've written. And also, if you go to my Etsy shop, you will see lots of spooky stuff like buttons, t-shirts, signed books. But the buttons and the t-shirts are lots of fun. And also, if you want to see the blooper reel from all my videos, including this one, because did I flub up a lot, then you can become a Patreon subscriber for just a couple dollars per month. I also include chapters of my book before they're out, and it gives you a chance to interact with me, basically behind the scenes. You get a chance to see where I'm going to be investigating next, what events I'm going to, and depending on what tier you sign up for on Patreon, you will get a free book every year. So if you're interested, head on over to patreon.com/thespookystuff. All right, now that I'm done selling my soul, let's get started. First thing that I want to address is, where did this topic come from for me? I had a TikTok video go viral, and it was essentially me sharing the story that is from One Bed Over a Hospital Haunting. My car accident, the spirit attachment. I've made a bunch of content on it. If you're curious about what happened, I have a YouTube video, and I have a book, and a haunted hospitals episode. After that video went viral, I got a lot of interview requests from different podcasts, and essentially those interviews required me to retell the story over and over again. I think there was one month I had like 15 interviews, and I retold the story about 15 times, and I can't tell you what that did to my brain and did to my emotional state. The first couple times I was fine, but then I started to notice that I was starting to get PTSD symptoms, and I do have PTSD from this car accident, just the car accident by itself. And my nightmares were coming back. I was having more panic attacks. I was getting flashbacks too. I mean, it was all coming back to me. And honestly, it got so bad that I was reconsidering whether or not I wanted to ever tell the story publicly again. I mean, and keep in mind that it took about 15 years for me to actually tell this story. So talking about this deeply traumatic chapter of my life, just a few times per month really sparked this reaction out of me. And this made me think about, what about the spirits and ghosts that we communicate with at these haunted locations? And we're essentially asking them to tell their story over and over and over again. Like, how does that make them feel? And I know in the case of ghosts, it's a little bit different because, body, soul, all that stuff. But think about these locations where there was a lot of trauma happening while these spirits may have been alive. And they have like groups of strangers coming in night after night, basically telling them or even demanding that they tell their story. And yet we wonder why sometimes some of the most haunted places in the world were met with silence. I mean, of course, it could be that the place isn't haunted, but what if the place is haunted and the ghosts just don't feel like talking to us? Now, of course, on TV, especially on all these TV shows, it seems that using trauma to get a response out of spirits is fairly regular. I mean, we have these TV investigators essentially asking, like, how did you lose your life? How did you pass away? When did you pass away? Did you have kids? Tell me about the Civil War. Tell me about this war. Tell me about the day that you lost your life. Even with like the more, negative spirits, spirits that are believed to be of negative people, it's like, why did you do this crime? I mean, and granted, with those types of spirits, maybe the rules are a little bit different. But what if, you have a space where, let's say it's a house where that's haunted, where the spirit of the person who did the unaliving, YouTube standards, and the victims are all in the same place. And while you're talking to the victims, you redirect to the perpetrator and you say, hey, why did you unalive such and such? Meanwhile, such and such is in the corner reliving their trauma. And we see this tactic being used so many times on TV that it's essentially become normalized. But there are a multitude of reasons to avoid using trauma to elicit responses. One, not only could you be triggering the spirit and upsetting the spirit, you could also be upsetting someone on your team who is alive. And I'll be honest, I feel like using trauma is a cheap tactic. I think we could do better and we can stretch ourselves and be a little bit more creative in getting responses from spirits. And this isn't just paranormal investigators who do this. I also find that skeptics will use this tactic too as a way to get a response because, they come in not really believing in the paranormal and they really want to see something. So they'll essentially go to the edge and really like hit on that uncomfortable topic, thinking that it could get a response. Maybe just to get a response out of the living, but I'm not exactly sure why they would do that. Not all skeptics do this, by the way. A lot of the skeptics that I've worked with have done this, and I've called them out on it. I mean, it's almost like, I don't believe you exist, but I'm going to exploit your trauma anyway. But some of the best skeptics that I know will still respect the space and respect the stories that are tied with that locations, and they won't do that. And also, using trauma is a very generic approach to investigating. And using trauma doesn't really go any deeper. It's just meant to get a response. Yeah, it's great for the data, but what's the consequences of that? Also, it means that that investigator is going into a haunted location with a bias. I mean, just because a major historical event is tied with that location, it doesn't necessarily mean that that historical event produced any spirits. I had a psychic medium on my team who used to go to every location and say, this is very old land. But let's be honest, all land is old. There's been history that happened on that land that we don't even know about. And there's maybe mundane history that didn't even hit the history books. Or some shady history happened that didn't hit the history books. But anyway, when you go in using trauma from a specific event that is tied to the location, you're going in with a bias, and it's also very broad, and it's not making you go in very deep. Finally, this is one of my final points on this. When you go into a haunted location using trauma, you lose trust. You lose trust from the spirits you're trying to communicate with, and you could potentially lose trust within your own group, especially if some of the methods that you're using to get a response upsets one of your team members. They're not going to trust you. I mean, could you imagine, and this is from the spirit's perspective, sharing or going through a really traumatic event in your life, and then someone is coming in exploiting that trauma in order to get a response out of you? What does that sound like? If you said bullying, you're right. This is a tactic that a lot of bullies use. All right, so I've talked about why we shouldn't be using trauma to get a response from spirits and ghosts. So what should we talk about? Now, for someone who's socially awkward like myself, coming up with topics to talk about with spirits can be a little tricky sometimes. I mean, I can't even do small talk with the living, so how can I do small talk with ghosts? And I'll be honest, I've learned a lot about social interactions from paranormal investigating. You know, it's the neurodivergent person in me. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, not every topic is going to be trauma-free for everybody, especially when you start talking about children or spouses or parents, family. Like talking about someone's child may bring that person joy, but then if you talk about someone else's child, that person could be like heartbroken with grief. So, I mean, this isn't a foolproof list, but again, this really dives into intent. So here are some things you can talk to ghosts and spirits about, like what brings them joy. You can talk about their daily lives. And to help you bridge into that topic, you can ask the spirits things like, what does the space look like around them? Hey, what does this room look like? You can ask who is around them. Spoiler alert, that could invoke some trauma. You can ask the spirits how many people are with you right now. You can talk about other things like, were they in love? Did they have children? What was their favorite game? What kind of entertainment did they like? Music. Music has been a really amazing investigative tool for me. Food. Talk about favorite foods. I mean, I've literally swapped recipes with a spirit. And this little list is just a starting point. Also, another topic is talk about you as well. I can't tell you how many times, we go into these haunted spaces trying to talk to spirits and ghosts, and we keep asking them questions and telling them to talk about themselves when they're probably just as curious about us as we are of them, but also this creates an even exchange of information, so it's not just us going in and asking the spirits all of these questions. We want to at least be giving of our own stories as well. And you never know, your own story may elicit a response because that spirit could find something in common with you, which is pretty amazing. And also, when you go in and tell your own story, you're not a complete stranger to that spirit anymore. And that helps build trust, because if you just go in and start asking questions, that spirit's going to be wondering, like, who are they to be asking us questions? But at least if you just talk a little bit about yourself, your life experience, you are essentially introducing yourself. It's polite. It's what we do with the living, so we should also do that with the dead. I know that I've gotten a lot of responses from spirits when I tell my own story or tell the story of my grandfather, especially at World War II sites. I don't know, it's just something to consider. And what's great about this list is you can keep it generic at first, and then depending on the type of answers that you get, you can start to get more granular, meaning you can start digging deeper into those details. And this can help you pinpoint what society they lived in, what moments in history may have happened with that spirit. So I like to call it like start big, go small. Start with a broad topic, use the answers to get smaller and get more granular. I am seeing more TV shows take an empathetic or empathic approach to paranormal investigation, and this does make me very optimistic for the future of the paranormal. But most of paranormal media and the paranormal entertainment business is still catching up, and they continue to default to trauma to get a response. I mean, paranormal activity is ratings. And like I said, not all paranormal TV is like this. There's a couple of TV shows that don't use this approach, which is good. But just keep in mind, when you do watch the TV shows that do exploit trauma, just keep in mind that these television investigators, paranormal investigators who copy what they see on TV, when they use trauma to get a response and to collect spooky evidence, they are leaving a mess of shattered feelings and trauma behind. What do you think? What do you think is the best way to get a response out of spirits? Let me know in the comments. And before you go, be sure to click on that subscribe button, give this video a like, and click on that notification bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. And feel free to check out my Etsy store and my Patreon and see if you want to get more involved in the spooky crew. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next round.